My daughter kicked me out of her own wedding. "Get out! You are ruining everything!" she screamed in front of 250 guests, her voice cutting through music and laughter. I just stood there, holding the envelope that carried my wedding gift, $5 million, the savings of a lifetime. Then I smiled, tore it clean down the middle, let the pieces fall like snow on marble. The room went silent. 5 minutes later, they were on their knees begging me to come back. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. When I parked my 15-year-old Camry behind the Ashton house, I sat for a full minute before turning off the ignition. The engine ticked as it cooled, echoing the pulse hammering in my chest. Through the windshield, I could see couples in tailored suits and designer dresses gliding toward the entrance, each one of them carrying the air of belonging. Men with watches that cost more than my truck, women with champagne laughter, all of them walking into a world that wasn't mine anymore. I looked at myself in the rearview mirror. The navy tie was neatly knotted, the same one I'd worn to Margaret's funeral 9 years ago. My daughter, Ivy, had picked it for me back then. She said it made me look strong, composed. Now it just felt heavy. On the passenger seat lay the envelope, crisp, thick, and deceptively plain. Inside it sat the check I'd signed 2 days earlier for $5 million. Everything I'd saved across 4 decades of running Pierce Builders. I'd meant it as a new beginning for Ivy and her husband, Gavin. A way to give her the foundation she deserved after all she'd lost when her mother passed. Back then, Ivy needed me. Or so I thought. When I stepped through the carved double doors, the world inside smelled like wealth. Orchids, champagne, and the faint bite of seared steak drifting from the kitchen. Crystal chandeliers glittered like they were cut from ice. The marble floors reflected gold light, and laughter rolled through the air like it belonged there. I tightened my grip on the envelope as I walked in. Ivy stood near the entrance, her white gown clinging to her frame like something out of a bridal magazine. Gavin, her new husband, was beside her in a charcoal gray suit so tailored it looked painted on. I forced a smile. "Ivy, Gavin, congratulations," I said softly, stepping closer. "I brought you something." Ivy's eyes flicked toward me, then away, her smile evaporating like she'd seen a ghost she didn't want to recognize. "Just put it somewhere, Dad," she muttered under her breath. Gavin didn't even turn his head. His attention was already sweeping the room for someone richer, more useful, more important. I stood there for a few seconds longer than I should have, feeling the air grow heavier around me, then walked toward the reception tables. Mine was tucked in the back corner, table 22, partially hidden behind a decorative column. My name card was printed smaller than the rest, as if they'd run out of ink. I sat alone. The centerpiece was so tall I couldn't even see the head table. White roses, silver stems, all meticulously arranged. Just another barrier between me and everyone else. Dinner service began an hour later. Waiters in white gloves delivered plates I didn't touch. Up front, Ivy and Gavin basked in the glow of their audience, their laughter too bright, too polished. I watched her smile at strangers like they were family, and glance past me like I was a stranger. Then Gavin stood up with a microphone in hand, his glass raised high. "You know what I love about tonight?" he said, his grin already rehearsed. "Everyone here gets it. Class, elegance, people who belong." He paused, eyes scanning the crowd. "You ever notice how some folks just don't fit anywhere?" Laughter rippled through the tables. Like, "Read the room, man. Know your place." Another wave of laughter. I felt it hit me like a spotlight burning against my face. He continued, voice oozing arrogance. Some people think they can walk into places like this, wearing clothes from 1995, and pretend they belong. But hey, he chuckled, points for trying, right? More laughter, some polite, some sharp. I set down my water glass. My hand was steady, which surprised me. Across the room, Ivy smiled, a strained, artificial thing that said she knew what was happening but wasn't going to stop it. I stood, quietly. No one noticed at first. I was too far in the shadows for that. I started walking, between tables, through scattered conversations and clinking glasses. Heads began to turn as I approached the head table. The envelope felt heavier now, like it was absorbing every ounce of humiliation in the room. When Ivy saw me, her smile froze. Her eyes widened, then hardened into something cold. "Dad, what are you doing?" she hissed as I reached the steps leading up to them. I stopped. "I wanted to give this to you personally," I said evenly. Her voice sliced through the hall. "Get out of here, Dad. You are ruining everything." The laughter stopped. 250 people went silent. Forks paused midair, all eyes snapping toward us. I took a breath. My pulse slowed, strangely calm. "All right then," I said, lifting the envelope. "If that's how you feel, then you won't need this." "What are you talking about?" Ivy frowned. I tore it once, cleanly, the sound slicing through the silence like paper thunder. Then again and again. 4 pieces drifting to the marble floor like falling leaves. Gasps, whispers, then panic. "Oh my God," someone shouted. Did he just... $5 million in ruined paper. I turned, straightened my jacket, and began walking toward the exit. Behind me, the ballroom erupted into chaos. Chairs scraping, voices rising. "Dad, wait! I didn't. I pushed through the double doors, stepped into the cool Texas evening, and kept walking. The stars overhead blurred slightly, though I wasn't sure if it was the night air or the tears I refused to admit were there. I reached my car, unlocked the door, and started the engine. When I looked in the rearview mirror, Ivy was running after me in her wedding gown, her heels clicking against marble, her face pale with realization. I drove away without looking back. The drive home took 20 minutes, though I barely remember any of it. One moment, I was leaving the Ashton House parking lot. The next, I was sitting in my driveway, staring at the dark windows of my home. The engine was still running, the low hum filling the silence like static. I shut it off and sat there, hands on the wheel. For the first time since Margaret's funeral, my house looked like a stranger's place. The porch light flickered once before going dark. I didn't move for a long time. Then I picked up my phone and placed it face up on the passenger seat. It buzzed before I could even get out of the car. Ivy calling. I watched it ring. The name glowed bright against the black screen. I didn't answer. When it went dark again, it lit back up. Gavin this time. I let that one die too. By midnight, I'd stopped counting the calls. The phone just kept lighting up, over and over, flashing like a heartbeat that wouldn't quit. Inside the house, I didn't bother turning on any lights. I walked straight to the living room and dropped into Margaret's old armchair, the one I'd meant to reupholster for years. The fabric was faded and rough, but it still carried the faintest trace of her lavender lotion. I leaned back, staring into the dark. The phone kept ringing. Then came the messages. "Dad, I'm sorry. Please, it was the stress. We need to talk. Dad, please pick up. You don't understand what this looks like. It wasn't supposed to go that way. Gavin didn't mean it. I didn't open any of them. I made coffee at 3 in the morning. standing in the kitchen watching the pot fill drop by drop. The smell filled the air, bitter and grounding. When it was ready, I poured a cup and sat again in that armchair. The phone sat glowing on the table beside me. 47 missed calls. For the first time in years, I didn't feel hollow. I didn't feel grief or sadness or even shame. What I felt was clean, sharp, something close to anger but colder. They'd grown comfortable treating me like I was invisible. Since Margaret died, I'd allowed it. I'd paid for Ivy's house, her car, the business ventures she never finished. When she said she couldn't keep up with payments, I covered them. When Gavin lost his job, I gave him one on my crew, knowing he'd quit in a month. I'd made myself small so she wouldn't feel guilt. Now, she'd finally noticed me. At 7, I showered, shaved, dressed for work. Khakis, button-down shirt, steel-toe boots. Same routine as every Monday morning for the last 40 years. Pierce Builders wasn't going to run itself. My office sat in a converted warehouse on the east side of town, surrounded by gravel lots and half-finished projects. I built it with my own hands when the company finally made enough to afford a headquarters. When I walked in, my secretary, Brenda, looked up from her desk. "Morning, Mr. Pierce. Coffee's fresh." "Thanks, Brenda," I said, then paused. "If my daughter or her husband come by, I'm unavailable until further notice." She raised her eyebrows slightly but didn't ask questions. Understood. I nodded and went into my office. The blinds were half drawn, sunlight cutting sharp lines across the floor. My desk was buried under blueprints and contracts, but I couldn't focus on any of them. My mind kept drifting back to the ballroom, the echo of Ivy's voice, the stunned faces, the torn paper floating to the floor. Around 11, Brenda's voice came through the intercom. "Mr. Pierce, your daughter is here. Says it's urgent. Tell her I'm not available." Through the slats of the blinds, I saw Ivy walk into the lobby, dressed now in jeans and a white blazer. Her hair was tied back, her face pale but determined. Gavin followed her, scrolling through his phone like it was a shield. Brenda spoke to them softly, but I could tell by Ivy's hands, the way they cut through the air, that her voice was rising. I sat back and watched her body language turn frantic. Gavin tried to calm her down. She shook him off. They waited. An hour passed. Then 2. At one point, Gavin stood up, his face red. "We've been here for hours. Where the hell is he?" I could hear the edge in his voice through the glass. "I'm sorry," Brenda replied calmly. "Mr. Pierce must have stepped out." Which wasn't a lie. While they were arguing, I'd walked down the back hallway, out the storage door, and across the lot to where my truck was parked on the side street. I drove to a diner 2 miles away, sat in a booth, and ordered breakfast for lunch. Eggs, toast, bacon, hot coffee with a refill I didn't need. I spent 2 hours there, reading the paper. When I returned to the office, Brenda looked up from her desk again. "They left about half an hour ago." She looked upset. "I'm sure she did," I said, and went into my office. That evening, when I got home, the mailbox held a letter. Cream-colored envelope, Ivy's handwriting across the front. Inside was stationery I recognized. Margaret had given her that set for her college graduation. I opened it carefully. "Dear Dad, I need you to understand that I was overwhelmed. The wedding planning was chaos, and Gavin thought it was best if everything stayed perfect. I was exhausted, emotional, and not thinking straight. I never meant to hurt you. You are my father, and I love you. Please, can we talk?" I read it twice, then again. She wasn't apologizing for what she did. She was apologizing for what it cost her. That realization settled deep, like a weight in my stomach. I stood there, the letters shaking in my hands, and for the first time that night, I smiled. It wasn't the kind of smile anyone would want to see. I walked to my desk, sat down, and opened my laptop. Typed a name I'd seen on a billboard on my drive home the week before: Stephen Wright, attorney at law, estate planning and family law. I dialed the number. The receptionist answered on the second ring. "I'd like to schedule a consultation," I said. "It's about my will." The woman on the phone paused. Then her tone softened into professional politeness. "Of course, sir. We have availability Thursday morning at 9 or Friday at 2. I looked at the calendar on my desk, the days blurring together into nothing that really mattered. "Thursday," I said. 9 o'clock. After giving her my details, I hung up and stared at the blank computer screen in front of me. The quiet of the house felt heavier than usual, pressing in on me from every direction. For years, that quiet had been a comfort, the kind that wrapped around you when you did not want to face anyone. Now it felt like judgment. The next morning, I woke up before dawn. The habit of early work hours never left me. I made coffee, black and bitter, and sat at the kitchen table surrounded by the evidence of a life that once meant something. Blueprints from projects I had built still lay rolled in the corner. Margaret's favorite vase sat in the center of the table, empty, dusty, and forgotten. I opened the letter Ivy had sent again, reading the words that now felt hollow. "Please understand," she had written. The phrase repeated in my mind like static. I had understood for too long. That was the problem. When Thursday came, the sky over Austin was a dull gray, the kind that made everything look colorless. I parked downtown, outside a tall glass building that reflected the morning traffic. Inside, the lobby smelled of lemon polish and old money. Stephen Wright's office was on the 12th floor. The elevator required a key card, and the waiting area displayed paintings that probably cost more than the equipment in my entire warehouse. A young assistant with perfectly tied hair greeted me, offered coffee, and led me to a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows. Stephen Wright stood as I entered, a man in his early 50s with silver at his temples and clear, assessing eyes. He shook my hand with the firmness of someone who made a living dealing with people in moments of high emotion. "Mr. Pierce?" he said, gesturing to the leather chair across from his desk. "You mentioned estate planning on the phone. I assume you have something specific in mind." I sat down, opened the briefcase I had not used since Margaret's funeral, and began laying out documents one by one. Property deeds, utility bills, bank statements. The weight of years spread across his desk like evidence. "My daughter lives in a house I own," I began, my voice steady. "She and her husband have been there 7 years. They do not pay rent. They do not cover utilities. Every bill, every repair, every maintenance call goes to me. Everything is in my name." I slid the deed across to him. Wright studied it, nodding slightly as he read. "Only your name," he confirmed. "No co-ownership." "Correct," I said. "She moved in after college. Said it would be temporary. Then Gavin came along. They got married, and I let them stay. I thought it would help them build a future. Instead, they started to believe it was theirs." Wright leaned back, adjusting his glasses. "Let me be clear. Since there is no written lease and they have never paid rent, they are classified as guests at will. Under Texas law, you can terminate their stay with 30 days written notice." I felt something loosen in my chest, a tightness that had been there since the wedding. "How quickly can we start that process?" Today, he said simply. He reached for a legal pad and began to write. I will draft the notice now. You will need to have it notarized and delivered via certified mail. Once they receive it, they have 30 days to vacate. If they refuse, you can file for eviction. Though most people do not contest once they understand that they have no legal standing. I watched him write. The steady sound of his pen moving across paper matching the rhythm of my own breathing. And if they do contest it? I asked. Then they will lose, he said, looking up. Without a lease, without any documented financial contribution, and without their names on the property deed, they have no grounds to challenge. You have complete control, Mr. Pierce. It is your house, your right, your decision. His tone was calm but resolute. The kind of voice that told me he had said those words to countless people who had finally decided to stop being taken advantage of. The consultation lasted over an hour. By the time I left, I carried a folder thick with documents, legal instructions, and the first draft of the notice. When I stepped outside, the city air felt sharper, cleaner. For the first time in years, I realized I held power over the one thing that had haunted me since Margaret's death. The house. The place that had once been filled with her laughter and Ivy's footsteps had turned into a symbol of every boundary I had allowed them to cross. 2 days later, on Saturday morning, I sat at my kitchen table again. Sunlight filtered through the blinds, casting stripes across the paperwork in front of me. The property deed, the utility bills, the insurance records, every page carried the same name, Harold Pierce. Not Ivy, not Gavin, mine. The reminder brought a strange comfort. I sipped my coffee and reread Wright's instructions twice before reaching for the pen. Each signature I placed on those pages felt like reclaiming something I had forgotten belonged to me. On Monday morning, I drove to Westlake Hills, to the house that had once been our family home. The route was familiar, though I noticed things I had not before. The road seemed narrower, the trees taller. I parked behind Ivy's SUV and sat there for a long moment. The paint job on the house still gleamed, the landscaping neatly trimmed. Everything looked perfect on the surface, but I could feel how artificial it was, like their marriage, like the smiles at that wedding. I unlocked the door with my own key and stepped inside. The air smelled faintly of fresh flowers and disinfectant, the kind of scent people use to cover something deeper. Ivy appeared from the kitchen, eyes widening with surprise before her face softened into a cautious smile. "Dad, you came," she said quickly. "Does this mean we can talk?" I did not answer. Instead, I walked past her and began taking photographs. The living room, the fireplace, the kitchen countertops, every corner of the house. "Dad, what are you doing?" she asked, following me. "Why are you taking pictures? Please talk to me." I moved to the hallway and took photos of the floors, the windows, the fixtures I had paid for. Gavin came down the stairs, his phone in his hand, pretending to stay calm. "Look, we have been trying to reach you. Can we please talk about what happened?" I kept taking pictures. "I am documenting the current condition," I said flatly. "Current condition of what?" Gavin's voice cracked slightly. "This is our home." I turned to him. "No," I said. "This is my property." Their faces froze in silence. I walked to the front door, looked around one last time, then stepped outside into the sunlight. As I drove away, the house grew smaller in my rearview mirror, and for the first time since Margaret died, I did not feel guilty for leaving it behind. I felt free. For years I had carried the weight of obligation, guilt, and silence. Now, that burden was gone. The morning after visiting Ivy's house, I woke up before dawn, made a pot of coffee, and sat by the kitchen window watching the slow light rise over the oak trees in my yard. The peace that morning brought was different from anything I had known in years. It was not happiness. It was calm resolve. I knew what I had to do next. By 9, I was parked outside the small office of Margaret Wilson, a local notary public who had handled paperwork for Pierce Builders in the past. She was an efficient woman in her 60s, with neat handwriting and a quiet voice that carried authority. When she looked up from her desk and saw the legal documents in my hand, she understood immediately that this was personal. She took the papers and read through them carefully, her lips moving slightly as her eyes tracked each line. "This gives them 30 days to vacate," she said at last. "It is clear, lawful, and fully enforceable under state code. Once you sign and I notarize, it becomes official notice. Are you certain this is what you want to do, Mr. Pierce?" I met her, eyes without hesitation. "Completely certain." She nodded once. "Then let us proceed." The sound of the notary's stamp pressed against the paper was sharp and final, like a gavel hitting wood. She handed me the certified mail envelope already labeled with Ivy's address. "This will be delivered within 2 business days," she said, sliding the receipt toward me. "Keep this in a safe place. It is proof of service." I thanked her, placed the envelope carefully inside my leather folder, and stepped out into the Texas morning. The sun was high now, and the air was thick with that familiar humidity that made everything shimmer. I stood beside my truck for a few seconds, looking down at the envelope in my hand. Inside it lay 30 days that would change everything. I drove straight to the post office, handed the envelope to the clerk, and watched her scan the barcode before dropping it into the outgoing bin. The clerk smiled out of habit, not realizing that what she had just handled was the end of an illusion. When I got home, I placed the receipt in the top drawer of my desk. The sound of it sliding into place was quiet, but heavy with finality. Then I sat back, closed my eyes, and let the silence stretch. I had not realized how loud guilt could be until it was gone. 3 days later, the phone started ringing again. Ivy's number first. I ignored it. Then Gavin's. Then Brenda's voice over the office intercom. "Mr. Pierce, your daughter is calling again. She says it is urgent." I kept my voice even. "Tell her I am unavailable." By noon, Brenda knocked softly on my office door. "They are here," she said quietly, "in the lobby." Through the blinds, I could see them sitting side by side. Ivy was dressed in a black dress this time, her hair pulled back, her posture smaller than usual. Gavin was tense, his jaw tight, his foot bouncing nervously. The certified mail envelope was clutched in Ivy's hand, the red stamp glaring even from a distance. Brenda approached them with her usual professional calm. I could not hear the words, but I could tell by Ivy's sudden gestures and Gavin's rising tone that the conversation was turning heated. I stayed behind the blinds, unseen. Within minutes, Ivy stood up, shouting, "He cannot do this. This is my home." Gavin grabbed her arm and whispered something, trying to keep her calm. She shook him off. He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply before speaking to Brenda again. "We need to talk to him now. Tell him this is a family emergency." Brenda did not waver. "I am sorry. Mr. Pierce is not available." When their voices began echoing through the lobby, I picked up the phone and called building security. "Mike, this is Harold Pierce. My daughter and her husband are in the lobby. They are not permitted entry to my office under any circumstances. If they refuse to leave, call the police for trespassing." Mike's tone was steady. "Understood, Mr. Pierce." 10 minutes later, the building fell silent again. When Brenda returned, her voice was quiet but firm. They left. Security escorted them out. "Thank you," I said. She paused in the doorway. "Everything all right, sir?" "Everything is finally right," I replied. That evening, after the office closed, I stayed behind. I turned off the lights, opened the blinds, and looked out at the dark parking lot below. The reflection in the glass showed a man I had not seen in years. Older, yes, and more tired, but steadier, grounded. 2 days later, the phone rang again while I was reviewing payroll. The number was unfamiliar. I almost ignored it, but decided to answer. "Harold Pierce?" I said. A calm voice came through the line. "Mr. Pierce, this is Marcus Chen. I represent Gavin and Ivy Morgan regarding a property issue. I believe you served them with a notice to vacate." I leaned back in my chair, the faintest trace of a smile tugging at my mouth. "Yes, that is correct. I was hoping we could reach an arrangement that benefits everyone. Perhaps some kind of compromise." "There is nothing to discuss," I said evenly. "The notice is legal, and it stands. With all due respect, this is a family matter, not a simple eviction. Surely you do not intend to—" I interrupted him. "Mr. Chen, if you have reviewed the deed, you know your clients have no legal standing. If they are paying you to tell them otherwise, that is between you and your conscience. They have until the end of the month to leave." He hesitated for a few seconds, realizing there was no negotiation to be had. "Understood, Mr. Pierce. Have a good day." When I hung up, I felt no anger, no satisfaction either, just quiet certainty, the kind that comes when you finally stop waiting for people to change and accept that you must be the one to draw the line. That night, when I got home, I opened a beer and sat on the back porch. The crickets were loud, the air thick with summer heat. Somewhere across town, my daughter was pacing her kitchen floor, rereading that legal notice, realizing that for the first time in her life, my word could not be ignored. The silence that followed those 30 days was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. It was not peaceful. It was charged, like the stillness before a thunderstorm. Every morning, I went to work, signed off on contracts, and came home to a quiet house. Each evening, I sat in Margaret's armchair, sipped my coffee, and checked my phone out of habit. No calls, no messages, nothing. I thought, perhaps, they had finally accepted the inevitable. I was wrong. It started on a Tuesday afternoon. My business partner, Tom Henderson, called while I was reviewing project blueprints. Tom had been with me for over 15 years. He handled commercial bids while I managed residential contracts. A good man, loyal, steady, and cautious with his words. That day, however, his tone carried unease. "Harold," he began, "I saw something online that you should probably know about. Your daughter posted about you." I sat back in my chair, a slow exhale leaving my lungs. What did she say? I do not want to repeat all of it. But the post is public. She claims you threw her out of the house without warning, that you left her and Gavin homeless, and that you refused to help after the wedding. She's getting a lot of sympathy. People are angry. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the words settle. Did she mention why? No, he said quietly. Just made it sound like you lost your temper and turned cruel overnight. I see. There was a pause before Tom added, Harold, I know you. This is not like you, but you might want to set the record straight. People are quick to believe what they read. I could hear the concern in his voice, but also the curiosity. Thank you, Tom, I said evenly. I will handle it. After hanging up, I opened my laptop and searched her name. It did not take long to find the post. There it was, on her profile. Her and Gavin smiling in their wedding photo. Faces carefully composed. The caption beneath it read, "Sometimes the people who should protect you the most are the ones who hurt you the deepest." After 7 years of living in the house my late mother loved, my father has decided to evict us without warning. We have nowhere to go. I do not know how to process this kind of cruelty. The post had already been shared hundreds of times. The comments were predictable. How could he? What kind of man does that to his daughter? Money makes people heartless. I read each one slowly, my jaw tightening. Then, without emotion, I closed the laptop. I did not reply. I did not defend myself. I did not even tell Tom what I planned to do. Some battles are not fought in the open. They are won quietly, when truth spreads on its own. 3 days later, Tom called again. "Harold, mind if I give your number to Mike Peters? He saw Ivy's post and wants your side of the story." "Go ahead," I said. That evening, Mike called. He was an old client, a straightforward man who valued honesty above all else. "Harold, I am not one to gossip," he said, "but what your daughter posted is making the rounds. I thought I should hear your side before passing judgment." So I told him everything. The wedding, the insults, the laughter, the $5 million check ripped apart in front of 250 guests, the house, the lies. By the end of the story, Mike was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the kind of anger only righteous people feel. "She did that in front of everyone? My God, I do not blame you one bit, not a single bit." "Thank you, Mike," I said simply. The next morning, my phone rang again. Another former client. Then another. Each conversation followed the same rhythm. They would call, hesitant, asking questions. I would tell the truth. By the end of each call, the tone would shift from doubt to sympathy. Ivy's story began to unravel the way lies always do when truth enters the room. By Friday, even Brenda, my secretary, came into my office with a knowing look. "Mr. Pierce, you might want to know that several people have called asking if the rumors are true. I told them to speak to you directly." I nodded. "That is fine, Brenda. Thank you." That afternoon, the tide turned completely. I received a call from the pastor of the community center where Margaret used to volunteer. "Harold," he said softly, "I saw Ivy's post, and I admit I believed it at first. But after hearing from some of the folks in town, I think I owe you an apology. She left out a few details, did she not?" "She did," I said. "But she is learning that sympathy fades when people know the full story." The following week, Ivy posted again. This time, her tone had changed. It was defensive now, pleading for understanding rather than demanding it. She wrote about how stress and misunderstanding had caused everything, how she had been misrepresented by gossip, how she just wanted peace. The comments were fewer this time, and many were skeptical. The momentum was gone. The damage she had tried to cause me had boomeranged back at her. One evening, I sat on my porch with a beer in hand, watching the sun sink behind the trees. The sky was a mix of red and gold, the same colors that had filled the horizon the day Margaret died. For years, that color had felt like grief. Now, it looked like closure. My phone buzzed beside me. A message from Ivy. "Dad, I want to talk. Please, you do not understand what people are saying. This is getting out of control." I stared at the message for a long time before setting the phone face down on the table. I finished my beer slowly, letting the bitterness sit on my tongue. She had spent years treating my silence as weakness. Now she was learning that silence, when chosen, is power. The next morning, Brenda buzzed through the intercom again. "Mr. Pierce, your daughter is downstairs." "Does she have an appointment?" "No, sir." "Then I am unavailable." There was a pause, then Brenda said quietly, "She looks like she has been crying." I took a breath, steady and calm. "So was I once," I said, and ended the call. For the next 2 weeks, the silence held steady. I went to work, reviewed bids, approved payroll, and spent my evenings alone in the same chair that had once been Margaret's. The phone still lit up sometimes. Messages from Ivy that started as pleas, then turned into apologies, then finally settled into silence of their own. The end of April came fast, the way things do when you are not dreading them. The 30 days were almost over. That morning, I woke before dawn, the air outside damp with spring rain. It was April 29th, one day before the deadline. I poured myself coffee and sat at the table with the calendar open in front of me. Each square of the month had been marked with something: a phone call, a meeting, a reminder. But one date had been circled in red. April 30th, vacate notice expires. By 9, I was in my truck heading toward Westlake Hills. The drive was quiet, familiar, the road curving through neighborhoods I had once helped build. When I turned onto the street where Ivy lived, I saw the moving truck immediately. It was parked crooked in the driveway, the kind of rushed parking job people do when they want to be done quickly. Mrs. Patterson, the neighbor next door, was out watering her garden. She looked up when she saw my truck and waved politely, though I could read the curiosity behind her eyes. "Morning, Mr. Pierce," she said. "Looks like there is a lot of activity at your property today." "Morning, Mrs. Patterson," I replied evenly. "Yes, that was expected." "I thought so," she said gently. "They seem upset, though. I hope everything is all right." "Everything is as it should be," I said, and left it at that. When I reached the driveway, Ivy was standing by the truck, giving directions to 2 movers who were struggling with a couch that barely fit through the door. She turned when she heard my footsteps. For a moment, her expression softened, as if she expected me to help. Then she saw the notary and appraiser walking behind me, both carrying clipboards, and her face hardened again. "Dad, what is this?" she asked. "This," I said, holding up the paperwork, "is an inspection and transfer of property control. It is standard procedure." Her voice trembled. "You do not have to do this in front of everyone." "I am not doing this for everyone," I said quietly. "I am doing it for myself." Inside, the house was nearly empty. The rooms echoed when we walked through them, the sound of our footsteps bouncing off bare walls. The hardwood floors gleamed. The kitchen counters were spotless. The house was cleaner than I expected. That detail, somehow, made the moment feel heavier. Frank Adams, the appraiser, moved methodically through each room, taking photos and making notes. Margaret Wilson, the notary, documented the inspection times and observations in her careful handwriting. I followed behind them, saying nothing. Ivy stayed close, her hands clasped tightly in front of her, eyes red from crying. In the master bedroom, the indentation of a bed frame still marked the carpet. Ivy stood there staring at the space, her voice breaking. "Do you remember when Mom picked this house, Dad? She loved the light in this room." I looked at the window. The sunlight fell across the floor in a wide band of gold. I did remember. I remembered Margaret laughing the first time she saw it, saying the house felt alive. I remembered Ivy running up the stairs as a teenager, slamming doors when she was angry, the echo of life in every corner. I remembered all of it. but I did not say a word. When the inspection was finished, we returned to the kitchen. Margaret Wilson opened her notary book. "Miss Morgan," she said formally, "do you surrender all keys and access to this property willingly?" Ivy hesitated, her hand hovering over the counter. For a second, I thought she might refuse. Then her shoulders slumped. "Yes," she whispered, setting 2 keys down. "Note the time and date," I said. "April 29th, 2025, 3:47 p.m. Margaret recorded it, then looked at me. "Mr. Pierce, as owner, do you accept the property?" "I do." Frank took a final photograph, the keys on the counter, my hand reaching for them. The image felt like closure captured in motion. Ivy turned toward the door. "Goodbye, Dad," she said quietly. "Ivy," I said softly. But she did not stop. She walked out without looking back, and for once, I did not follow. I stood there in the empty kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. After they left, I walked through the house one last time. Every room was spotless. No damage, no vandalism, no petty revenge. Just emptiness. I ran my hand along the kitchen counter and thought of Margaret's hands in that same spot years ago. Shaping dough, laughing as the radio played softly in the background. I closed my eyes for a moment, then exhaled. When I locked the door, the click of the deadbolt echoed down the hall. Back at home, I poured myself a drink and stood by the window as dusk settled over the yard. I should have felt relief, maybe victory. Instead, I felt something quieter, the kind of peace that comes when a wound stops bleeding but has not yet healed. The next morning, I woke to a new message on my phone. It was from Ivy. "Dad, we moved out. I know you were hurt. I want to make things right. Please talk to me." I read it once, then again. The old me would have replied immediately, would have offered comfort, forgiveness, maybe even money. The man I had become simply placed the phone face down on the counter and went to work. 2 days passed. Then another message came. "Dad, please. You are still my father. Can we meet?" I stared at the screen for a long time before typing 2 words. "Maybe later." The reply came within minutes. "Thank you for responding. That means everything." I did not respond again. That night, I sat on the back porch, the sound of crickets rising around me. Somewhere across town, Ivy was unpacking boxes in a smaller house, learning what life without my safety net felt like. She was beginning a new chapter. But so was I. Mine had no guilt in it anymore. The following week, the message came that changed everything. I was sitting in my office reviewing supply orders when my phone buzzed with a number I did not recognize. I almost ignored it until I saw the text that followed. "Dad, it is me. Please, just dinner. One conversation, no arguments. I want to explain." I stared at the screen for a long time before typing my reply. "Where and when?" Her answer came immediately. "Ironworks, BBQ. Next Thursday. 6 o'clock. Gavin will be there too." For a few seconds, I considered refusing. I knew whatever she wanted would not be about reconciliation. It would be about leverage. Still, something in me wanted to see their faces again, wanted to hear what excuse they had rehearsed. I typed back, "I will be there." Thursday came warm and bright, the kind of evening where the air smells like smoke and salt from the grill. I arrived at the restaurant at exactly 6. They were already there in a corner booth. Ivy looked thinner than before, her hair pulled back, her makeup carefully done to hide the circles under her eyes. Gavin sat beside her, his smile stiff, his suit cheaper than the ones he used to wear. The performance had already begun. "Dad," Ivy said as I slid into the booth across from them. "Thank you for coming. I did not think you would." "I said I would," I replied evenly. "So here I am." The waiter came and took our orders. I asked for brisket and iced tea. They ordered salads, but did not touch them when they arrived. Ivy started talking almost immediately. Her words spilled out in a nervous rush. We just wanted to talk about everything that happened. The wedding, the house, the arguments. We were wrong. Completely wrong. The way we treated you was horrible, and I cannot tell you how sorry I am. Gavin nodded solemnly, his voice smooth and careful. "I want to echo that, sir. Things got out of hand. The stress, the pressure, it made us act foolishly. We are trying to be better." I listened without interrupting. Their words felt rehearsed, each line polished like a speech. When they paused, I took a sip of my tea and set it down carefully. "So, what is it you actually want?" I asked quietly. Ivy's eyes widened. "We just want to fix things. We are family." "Family is not a word," I said. "It is behavior." She swallowed hard. "Then tell me what I need to do. Please. I want to make this right." I let the silence stretch before answering. "You start by understanding that forgiveness is not owed. It is earned." Gavin leaned forward, trying to sound sincere. "We are working on ourselves. Counseling, budgeting, trying to rebuild our lives. We just want you in it again." I looked at him, studying his expression. There was calculation behind his eyes, the faintest hint of impatience. He wanted something more than peace. He wanted access. I could see it clearly now, the look of a man who had learned to measure people by what they could provide. "That is good," I said finally. "Self-improvement is important." Ivy's face brightened. "Then we can start over? Move forward?" "We will see," I said. The rest of the meal was filled with nervous small talk. They spoke about their new apartment in Cedar Park, how it was smaller but cozy, how they were managing fine. I nodded occasionally, offering nothing. When the waiter brought the check, he placed it in the center of the table out of habit. For years, I had always picked up the bill, always reached for it first. This time, I did not move. After a few seconds, Gavin cleared his throat. "I can get it if..." I pulled my wallet out, placed a 25 on my side of the table, and stood up. "I will pay for myself. You pay for yours." Ivy blinked, confused. "Dad, no. You always. You are independent now," I said. "You can handle your own expenses." Gavin tried to smile. "Come on, sir. We are just trying to make peace here." "I know," I said, pushing my chair back. "And I am giving you that chance. But peace does not mean dependency." Then I walked toward the door, leaving them sitting there in silence. Through the window, I could see Ivy drop her head into her hands while Gavin gestured sharply, his face twisting with frustration. They had rehearsed for reconciliation, not rejection. Outside, the evening air felt lighter. I stood by my truck for a moment, breathing deeply. Then I got in and drove home. By the time I reached my driveway, the decision had already formed in my mind. It was time to make my will official. 4 days later, I was back in Stephen Wright's office. He greeted me with that calm professionalism that made him seem unshakable. "Mr. Pierce," he said, gesturing for me to sit. "What can I help you with today?" "I need to finalize my estate," I said. He opened his notepad. "You do not have a will currently, correct?" "Correct, and I intend to change that." "Understood." He clicked his pen and waited. "Let us start with your assets." I laid everything out. The construction company, valued at approximately $5.5 million after recent contracts. The Westlake property, soon to be listed for sale at $2 million. My personal savings and investments, another $1.5 million. In total, a little over $8 million in assets. Stephen wrote quietly, then looked up. "And how would you like this distributed?" 70%, I said, "goes to a charitable foundation. I want it used to build affordable housing for seniors in Texas." Margaret believed in that. She said dignity should not depend on wealth. He nodded and wrote. "And the rest?" 20% to a scholarship fund in Margaret's name. 10% to Ivy, on one condition. She must be debt-free at the time of my passing. If she is not, that share transfers to charity as well. Stephen paused, looking up at me over his glasses. "That is legally sound. But you should know she will likely contest this." "She can try," I said, "but she will fail. It is my money, my life's work, and I will decide how it is used." He nodded slowly. "Then we will prepare it exactly as you wish." 2 weeks later, I returned to sign the documents. The process was straightforward. Witnesses, signatures, stamps. When it was done, Stephen handed me a sealed envelope. "Keep this somewhere safe. You have done the right thing, Mr. Pierce. Your assets, your choice." I left the office feeling lighter than I had in years. For the first time, my legacy belonged to me again. 3 weeks later, I made the final move that would end everything connected to my old life. The Westlake house, the place where Margaret once filled every room with warmth, the same house Ivy had called hers for years, went on the market. Patricia Grant, the same realtor who sold it to us back in 2011, met me at the property on a clear Tuesday morning. She still carried that sharp professional calm that made people trust her instantly. "You sure about this, Harold?" she asked as we stood in the empty living room, sunlight pouring across the hardwood. "Completely sure," I said. "Too big for one man. Time to let it go." She nodded. "It will sell fast. This neighborhood always does." 3 days later, I had a full cash offer. $1.8 million from a retired couple from California. They wanted a quick close. I accepted it immediately. Patricia called me the next morning, almost in disbelief. "Fastest sale I've had all month," she said. When the papers were signed, I drove to the house one last time. The new owners had not moved in yet. The air inside smelled faintly of lemon polish, and the echo of my footsteps filled the hall. I walked from room to room without hurry, touching the walls, remembering everything that had happened within them. Margaret's laughter, Ivy's tantrums, birthdays, arguments, silences. Then I reached the kitchen and placed my palm flat on the counter. It felt cool and still. "Goodbye, Margaret," I whispered, and locked the door behind me. That night, my phone rang. Ivy. I let it ring twice before answering. "Dad, tell me it is not true," she said, her voice already shaking. "Jennifer drove by and saw the for sale sign. You cannot sell the family house, Mom's house." "It was never your house," I said calmly. "It was mine. I have sold it." There was a long pause, then a choked whisper. "You are erasing us." "No," I said quietly. "I am rebuilding myself." She started to cry, but I ended the call before the noise could reach me. A week later, I moved into my new condo downtown. A quiet building on West 6th Street with glass walls that overlooked the city skyline. 2 bedrooms, one for me and one I would never use. A clean kitchen, a balcony, no ghosts. I bought it in cash. No memories attached. It felt like breathing after years of stale air. For a while, I thought that might be the end. But people like Gavin do not let go easily. One evening, as I was leaving the office after a meeting, I saw him leaning against the wall outside the building. He looked thinner, desperate, his shirt wrinkled, his phone clutched in one hand. When he saw me, he straightened quickly and smiled that false smile of his. "Harold," he said, stepping forward. "Just give me 5 minutes, man to man." "Make it 1, said. He shifted awkwardly. We got off on the wrong foot. We both said things we regret. "Thank you. What if we make this right? We can pay rent for the house, start over. Even help you with your construction firm. I have contacts." I stared at him for a moment. "The house is sold. The company is mine. And you have nothing I need." He tried again. "We could sign papers, make it official. $500 a month, whatever you want." "You had a chance to act like human beings," I said flatly. "That chance is gone." He stepped forward, his voice rising. "Come on, Harold. She is your daughter. You cannot just walk away from family." I opened my truck door. "Watch me." When I looked back in the mirror, he was standing under the streetlight, staring after me, still holding his phone like a man who had run out of cards to play. 5 days later, Ivy posted again on social media. I should have ignored it, but curiosity won. The post was long, dramatic, and filled with half-truths. My father has sold the family home, disowned us, and refuses to speak to me. After years of devotion, he has turned cruel and cold. Money does that to people. The comments poured in at first: sympathy, outrage, support. But within hours, the other side of the story began to surface. Former clients, old family friends, even co-workers of mine began replying, "Ask her about the wedding. Ask about the $5 million. Ask about what really happened." By that evening, Ivy deleted the post. That was the moment I realized something fundamental had shifted. The story was no longer mine to defend. The truth had its own wings now, and it flew without me. A few days later, I received a call from Helen Foster, one of Margaret's oldest friends. Her voice trembled with restrained anger. "Harold, I just spoke to Ivy. She tried to make me believe you threw her out for no reason. But then I asked about the wedding. She hung up on me." Helen sighed. "Margaret would have been proud of you for standing firm." I swallowed hard. "Thank you, Helen." That night, I poured myself a drink and stood by the window, the city lights flickering below. I thought about Margaret and how she used to tell me that standing up for yourself does not make you cruel. It makes you whole. For the first time, I believed her. The summer rolled in quietly. The foundation paperwork was finalized. The Margaret Pierce Housing Initiative received its nonprofit status with a starting fund of $5.6 million. 3 projects were already approved: senior apartments in East Austin, veteran housing in Round Rock, and affordable duplexes in Pflugerville. Each blueprint bore her name. When I received the confirmation letter, I placed it on my refrigerator with a magnet. I looked at it every morning. It was the proof that something good had come from all that pain. A week later, another envelope arrived. Handwritten, cream-colored, the familiar script instantly recognizable. Ivy. I sat on the balcony and opened it carefully. The letter was 4 pages long. She wrote about therapy, debt repayment, learning humility. She said she and Gavin were attending counseling, that she was taking accountability for her choices, that she was trying to become someone her mother would be proud of again. She did not ask for money. She did not ask for forgiveness. She only wrote, "I am not the same person anymore. I know you may never want to speak to me again, but I needed you to know that I am trying." When I finished reading, I folded the letter neatly and placed it in my desk drawer. I did not reply. I did not need to. Forgiveness is not always something you say aloud. Sometimes, it is the quiet decision not to carry the anger anymore. Weeks passed, and I began to travel again. I took a trip to Sedona, the place Margaret had always wanted to visit. The red cliffs rose like cathedrals, and when the sun set, the whole sky turned to fire. Standing there, with the desert wind against my face, I whispered to her photo, "We made it, Maggie. You were right. Peace was waiting all along. I just had to stop protecting the wrong people to find it." When I returned home, Stephen Wright called one last time. "Everything is finalized, Mr. Pierce," he said. "Foundation, will, estate, all set. You are officially free." I laughed softly. That is the best word I have heard in years. That evening, I sat at my favorite cafe, sipping a cappuccino instead of my usual black coffee. The barista raised an eyebrow. "Feeling adventurous today, Mr. Pierce?" "Something like that," I said, smiling. As I watched the people passing by, parents with strollers, couples holding hands, kids chasing pigeons, I felt something I had not felt in years. Belonging. Life was still happening, with or without the people who had betrayed me, and I was finally part of it again. My phone buzzed once more. An email from the foundation. The subject line read, "First groundbreaking scheduled for September 15th. I smiled and closed my eyes for a moment, picturing the ribbon cutting. The first family moving into a home built from the ashes of everything I had lost. For the first time since Margaret's death, I was not living in memory or anger. I was living forward. If you liked this story, subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments. What would you have done if your own child humiliated you like this? To hear the next story, click on the box on the screen.